All right, so I just want to have a quick little video kind of discussing something in React that one of my Discord users actually failed a coding interview. Like they actually denied him because he couldn't explain this or he didn't understand why this was the case. So I think it's important to understand. I do think that was kind of messed up for him to fail an interview because of this, but basically in React, what happens is you can conditionally render out some things, right? So we have this testing text. And let's say we wanted to conditionally render this out, right? I could go ahead and make this a span if I wanted to like maybe style it. But to conditionally render it, one approach is you can simply just say true, double ampersand, and like this. So now whenever I were to change this true to false, it would not render this, right? So let's go to the page. It's displaying right now. But if I go and do false here and save it, notice that it doesn't render, right? So this is one way you can do conditionally rendering in React. And this is a common approach. A lot of people say that this isn't a good approach. What you should do instead is a ternary, and you should basically do this if you shouldn't. All right, let me do this. You should kind of fall back on null if this thing is not true. Actually, let me make this a little bit more realistic. So I'm going to say const show testing, set show testing. I'm going to go ahead and say use state, like so. And I'm going to go ahead and say false here. So now what we're going to do instead is use that state variable to conditionally show this testing span or show null based on if this is true or false, right? So since this state starts off as false, it's not going to show, right? But his question, the thing that he failed, the thing that he couldn't understand or he failed to explain is that let's say this thing was actually an array. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and say like items, and I'll say set items. Let's say we wanted to actually map over this thing, or we wanted to only conditionally show it, doing the other approach. And I'm going to say, make sure you only show testing if items.length and this. Okay, so if you're not familiar with the React, you haven't run into this before, what do you think this is actually going to print out to the page? Before I show you the page, just try to guess. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is actually going to print out 0. Okay, and you might say, well, why is React printing out 0, because isn't this falsy? And the way React works is it's going to interpolate and display strings and numbers. And what I mean by that is like if you were to go ahead and just put a number here, like that, it's going to print out the number. Even if it's a falsy number, it's going to print it out. And also strings. So if I do hello, it's going to print out hello. But if I go ahead and do like a Boolean, false, notice that false does not print out to React because React will only do it with numbers and strings. So let's take a step back and try to figure out why does this item's length print out 0 instead of this. Okay, so one way you can check this is I'm just going to go ahead and go over to the JS bin just to kind of share something with you. Go ahead and load up JS bin real quick. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a console log here. I'm going to say console log items. I'm going to go ahead and just do this. So this is kind of to highlight what happens with this Boolean expression, right? So if you were to do 0 and hello, what do you think is going to print out here? Now, if I run this, you'll notice that it's probably going to print out 0. Okay, because when you have something and something else, what JavaScript does is it's going to fail on the first thing that's falsy and then return it, right? So if I also were to put like an empty string here, this is going to return an empty string. Because again, this is falsy, so it's going to print out whatever the value is of it. So if I do 0, this is why it prints out 0. So with this logic, 0 ampersand hello ultimately is going to be returned to 0 from JavaScript. If you go over to the code, items length of 0, and whatever this is, it doesn't matter because it's never going to reach that the way Boolean expressions work in JavaScript. This is actually going to just be 0 here, which is why it prints out 0 to the page. That's pretty crazy. And now a quick workaround is you could actually just do a double not here if you wanted to. That'll fix it. You could also be more explicit and say if it's equal to, or if it's not equal to 0, that'll fix it. You could say if it's greater than 0, that'll also fix it. So basically what you need to do is you need to use some type of double not or this greater than sign to force this expression to be a Boolean, right? So if you, the moment you say if items.length is greater than 0, this is going to return a Boolean of true and false. And because React doesn't render false out to the page, when this expression returns false, React just doesn't show anything, okay? So that's another argument as to why you should just use ternaries, because it can be kind of tricky when you are checking length and you want it to actually not render it, right? So if a length is defined, render it, otherwise don't render it. So I don't know if that was a good overview. It kind of sucked that he failed his interview just because of that, and he couldn't explain why that's happening. I don't think that's something super important to like really know in an interview. So, but I wanted to share that with you all because it is a little piece of information that I think is interesting to know about React, and you will run into this when you're dealing with arrays or dealing with some type of collection and you need to check the length of that collection. I guarantee you're going to hit this and you're going to be confused when you see a bunch of zeros all over your React application. Anyway, if you enjoyed this little overview, give me a thumbs up, comment, subscribe, whatever. And also feel free to join my Discord if you want to talk to me directly or just kind of get help if you're stuck with programming or React in general. We got a lot of people there who are willing to help you out and answer your questions if you have any. Have a good day and happy coding.